lot of people haven't even heard of what's going on. Goes outside of his house in New Jersey, flips his phone up, records the drones, and posts it on Twitter. And he's got tons of people being like, what the hell are these things?
I think the interesting thing too is other people were there like, oh, this is nothing's going on out there. Even the media, this isn't going on. And then they went out there and they got video and they're like, wait, no, there's something going on out here.
They're doing something that they don't want people to know about. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Capitalist Podcast. My name is Austin Bronner. I'm here with my co-host, Cody Shirk. What's up, man? How are you doing? You're back in Florida.
Back in Florida. I was in Sedona, Arizona the past week.
Beautiful Sedona.
Man, if you've never been to Sedona before, it's one of the few places on earth where there's like mystical energy surrounding you. And it's hard to explain, and it sounds so ridiculous if you've never been there before, but it's so beautiful. The landscape is insane, and there's just energy that kind of recharges you. So highly recommended to go there.
It's funny coming from you because I know many other people who talk about the energy in Sedona, but not Cody. Cody comes to Austin, Texas, and he's like, oh, there's hipsters everywhere.
Yeah, I'm not like religious or like super energy woo woo at all, but that place like
no,
makes you
not at all.
No, but that place makes you question a lot of things. And there's
Are you gonna move, man? Are you gonna make the move?
No, my buddy lives out there, so I go out there several times a year and visit him. And we always go on these hikes. And you go to these hikes, I won't tell what they are because there's these secret hikes, and they go to a lot of them are these sacred Indian places, Native American places.
Yeah. And
man, I'm telling you, like you want to be so respectful there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could get struck down by lightning if I do something wrong here. Sure. It's like, it just makes you, I don't know, have this connection to nature that is really powerful. So it's a cool spot.
I love it. I love it. I love that coming from you. It's not something I hear very often from Cody. We're excited to dive in. Before we get in today, I'm excited. We got a lot of interviews coming your way, and it's one of the things that I'm kind of most excited about with the podcast is evolving from these weekly episodes into adding some more interviews. So that is coming down the pipe. So be prepared for that. Check your podcast, subscribe, make sure that you're subscribed to this on YouTube and on whatever you'd like to listen to it. I like mostly Spotify, but subscribe so that when these new episodes come out, you will be notified. Speaking of energy, the beautiful Sedona has the vortex. New Jersey has some energy going on right now. We don't know what the hell is going on in New Jersey. If you haven't, this is a very interesting story because I've talked to a lot of people. Some people, they're really into it and they've been following it closely. A lot of people haven't even heard of what's going on. There are videos of drones. I'm going to say drones because that's the way they've been described. But really, if you think about it, it's really like something unidentified that is flying. You know, the old way of saying it was UFO, but now it's UAP. And there's videos of drones all over New Jersey, New York, DC, Phoenix, Pennsylvania, all over the country. And we're going to play some videos as we're talking about what's going on here. Some of these videos, you can see very clearly what's going on. And the interesting part is you've got people, even one of my friends who I was talking to a couple days ago, goes outside of his house in New Jersey, flips his phone up, records the drones and posts it on Twitter. And he's got tons of people being like, what the hell are these things?
I think the interesting thing too is other people were there like, oh, this is bullshit. Nothing's going on out there. Even the media, this isn't going on. And then they went out there and they got video and they're like, wait, no, there's something going on out here.
Something is going on.
I want to know real quickly, Austin, like just your gut reaction. We're going to go into like what it could be, but I just want to know what your personal, if you had to point your finger to, this is what it is. What is it? Like, what would you say it is right now?
I mean, I think it's military performing some sort of an operation that is confidential. And this is why the U.S. government is denying all involvement in this. And it's also very clear, like it's not a foreign actor, because if it was a foreign actor, we would probably just shoot him out of the sky or we'd take care of it. So it's got to be something, in my opinion, it's got to be something domestic. And my guess is that it's some sort of military technology. They're doing something that they don't want people to know about. And it's created this really weird dynamic because people are on the ground being like, I could look up and see with my eyes that there's something weird going on up there. And then the government is reporting and saying nothing weird is going on there. And when that happens, it just creates a lot of distrust and strangeness. So let's dive in. So what about you?
Yeah, I would say that. I hate to bring this my background up, but as when I was a firefighter, I was an anti-terrorism specialist, and we dealt with detecting. I'm using very layman terms here, but detecting, say, chemicals or smells or radiological signals, whatever you want to say it is. It's a very normal thing to do that. In fact, the equipment for that, pretty much every emergency service across the U.S. around the world has pretty simple equipment to be able to detect these types of things. And the combination with drones is not that high tech at all. So there's this rumor going around. I don't think it's this, but there's rumor going around that there's a rogue nuclear weapon out there. And that's what these drones are up in the sky doing, trying to detect where this thing is. I don't believe that. I don't think that's going on for a number of reasons, but that is one of the narratives going on.
The reason why the narrative is because there was a guy, a CEO of a drone company, who put out a 5-minute or so TikTok talking about what he thinks that it is. And it was a quite compelling video. And a lot of people retweeted it, and it gained a lot of traction.
Yep. It was the quick background. There was multiple nuclear weapons that went missing from Ukraine decades ago when Ukraine denuclearized, and one of them is missing. And that's the one that's supposedly in the US. I call BS on that for so many reasons. It's an exciting story. It sounds credible because this guy talks about it. He's a drone CEO, but there's so many holes in that story. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. That's not to say that there aren't bad people in the US and there aren't possibilities that there's some plan to do something. Not discounting that, but that specific story, there's just a lot of things like, I don't know about that. So to answer your question directly, though, what do I think it is? I think it's a combination of kind of what you said. I think there's recreational drones, people out there like that have drones screwing around. I think it's the government and a combination, plus just more people being more aware of what's going on and looking into the sky more. And it's one of those things where the tension is just being brought on it now. So I think it's a combination of all those things together, which is making this like frenzy of attention towards this topic.
Some of the main theories. One, there's the nuclear sniffing theory, which came from this guy on TikTok, but then it spread on X and all over. There's an idea that they're doing the same thing, but like sniffing for chemicals, right? So that they're driving over looking for chemicals. One,
that's real, by the way. Like that's pretty normal.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, you can do that pretty easily. Yeah.
So that's an idea that maybe some of these things are that. There's the PSYOP by our own government that they're testing our reaction and that they're gonna release things. I think have you spent any time in the Reddit, like UAPs?
Oh, a
UFOs,
little bit. You go down the rabbit hole. Some of the stuff is interesting to think about, but some is just so far off the wall. But I do think that's interesting about the PSYOP stuff. I think the general public doesn't realize that the government tests stuff out all the time to see what the reaction of the public will be. I'm not saying this is it, but I do think that's a real, like, hey, that could be it. Hey, if we put up 100 drones in one night at 1 a.m. in the morning, like, are people going to notice it? Is this going to be a frenzy? Like, clearly people are noticing it right now, though.
That's interesting. The Reddit thing is, if you haven't gone on it, the reason I find it interesting as well is they put up videos, and then people will go and some of them will, they'll spend a lot of time identifying. So they will, let's just say, reduce the credibility of somebody. Someone will post a video, and then all the people will comment, oh, this is actually what that is. And so there's videos that are actually that look very credible, but then somebody will track it down and connect it to a specific plane with the lighting, the lighting arrangement, and it'll then take it from being unidentified to identified. Which is
I think on X, people are pretty good at that too. The community notes is like, oh, this video is from 2018 or whatever, and that's incredible. I think they run AI on it to match other video in the past, and it's incredible. With on one hand, the internet's like this rabbit hole of all this crazy stuff. On the other hand, we're able to suss out like, hey, is this a legit video or even related? Like pretty quickly.
Insane. The other idea is an Iran mothership is launching drones offshore. I think that's pretty unlikely. There's, people talking about being a foreign actors like China, Russia, North Korea. Again, I think that's unlikely because I think we'd be able to figure that out pretty quickly.
I'll comment on that real quick. I think that I don't think that's the case.
You don't think
Right
so?
now, no, but I think that's much more possible than people realize. And I'll tell a quick story. In 2007 ish, off the coast of California, there was a ICBM launch from a submarine, about 50, 100 miles offshore, and there's pretty strong evidence it was the Chinese that did that, and it was a launch to say like, hey, we're out here, we can do this, just kind of like a shot across the bow. And you can look this up. There's tons of information on the internet
What
about
would we
it.
look up? What would we look up? So
Just look
ICBM
off,
launch,
yeah, off of Los
China.
Angeles. Yeah,
Okay, off Los
and
Angeles.
you'll find stuff about it. My point is that there's definitely the ability of foreign actors to make a statement saying, "Hey, we
That
could
is
do
so
this."
different though than like drones going back and
For
forth.
sure.
That's a
Absolutely.
one-off. You
I
know,
just don't want to discount this thing like the US is some impenetrable box that like
for
other
sure.
countries can't mess with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, the Department of Defense released a press release. It says the FBI has received tips of more than 5,000 reported drone sightings in the last few weeks, with 100 leads generated, and the federal government is supporting state and local officials in investigating these reports. They said that having closely looked at the technical data and the tips, they assessed that it's a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-winged aircraft, helicopters, and stars mistakenly reported as drones. They have not identified anything anomalous and do not assess the activity to date to present a national security or public safety risk. New Jersey, hold on, hold tight. And you know what? Unfortunately, if something weird goes on, it seems like you'll be the first to know about it, for right or for
Right.
wrong.
Real quick on this press release, well, I guess we can throw it up there just so people can see. I think this is what the government should have done earlier. And
Yeah.
to be clear, this is a DoD press release, but a joint release with the DHS, the FBI, the FAA, basically all the three-letter organizations saying a unified message. Because part of the like conspiracy with this whole thing is that there was multiple statements coming out from different agencies at the same time, and they were kind of conflicting themselves. And
Well,
it
there
just
was
looks
governors saying
Yeah.
something different than senators saying different than the president. Everything was different.
it just makes the government look stupid. So if you're going to take make a statement, whether it's true or not, just be consistent so you don't create a frenzy with the U.S. population. And by the way, the statement by the DoD or any government agency, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying they're intentionally lying, but there's always stuff going on that is not really disclosed.
For sure. Interesting nonetheless, and has stoked a lot of the UAP believers.
Drones
So,
are coming, that's for sure. I don't think anybody will
yes.
deny that the future is going to be more of these drones doing, whether it's recreational stuff, whether it's observation, whether it's whatever it is. Like drones are the future, 100%.
So interesting going north, right? Turmoil on our northern border. If you haven't been following, the Canada's finance minister and deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, has resigned from her position. That deals a pretty significant blow to Prime Minister Trudeau's leadership. Now, I want to go through a couple of things that just to give some context about her, because she ultimately resigned because she had differences in beliefs about how they should proceed going forward with Trump in the Trump administration, and also just in general leading Canada. She's been the most powerful person serving under Trudeau for years and years and years, and she also held the title of Deputy Prime Minister. After Trump won, Trudeau appointed her to lead a cabinet group developing a strategy on how to respond to U.S. policies. And a lot of the reason that she actually resigned came down to this, because she was put forward to lead this, and she said that she's effectively at odds with the Prime Minister Trudeau in his path moving forward for Canada compared to what she wants to. One of the main things that she's frustrated with is she believes that they should actually take these 25% tariff threats seriously and create some sort of reserve in case they have to be more fiscally conservative than Trudeau wants to be. And so she resigned, and boom, we don't know what's going to happen, but it was a big issue for Trudeau. So what do you think, Cody? This kind of came out this week. What are your thoughts on this? Is this the end of Justin Trudeau? Did Trump just fire Justin Trudeau with some of his actions?
It's a great question because like anything in government that's going on, you never really know what's going on behind the scenes.
No.
And so we're trying, just like we're talking about the UAPs, like what's really going on, we don't know, but trying to read through all of this, conflicting information. She resigned like literally hours before she was supposed to present this financial proposal of how to move forward. And I think this was a snub to Trudeau. Obviously, this is clearly like a huge hit to him if he's having
He's
his
not,
numbers.
and he's not that popular right now.
No. So what I was getting at about us not knowing, she may know something going on in the background where this is a sinking ship. There's no possible way to save this thing. So she's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
But I also want to put this whole thing into Canada and the US into context, because it's very quick to get like, oh my God, we're going to be aggressive to each other. But at the end of the day, everyone makes a joke about Canada being the 51st state, but that's more or less what Canada is. There's no offense to Canadians, but our economies are so intertangled now. We have the same language. We have the same, culture. Everything's very similar. It's not like we're going to go to war or anything. This is very almost silly that it would escalate much more.
Their entire economy is almost the same. It's the same size as like some of our larger states.
Yeah. Well, the population of Canada is 40 million people, and California is about 38 million people. So, if you want to, and Canada's huge, by the way, the landmass wise. So, when you look at a map, like, wow, there's a big country, but people wise, it's really a fraction of what the U.S. is. So Canada is very reliant on the U.S. economy. And not to say that the U.S. doesn't get great things from Canada, but I guess my point is about this escalation going to get much worse, or us going to have this huge stalemate. Like, it's just not going to happen. And also, Trump, he's very off-putting to typical Canadians. Canadians are super nice. They don't like conflict. And when Trump comes in and has these harsh tariff negotiating tactics, I think it was through a lot of Trudeau's off or cabinet off their rocker, it really triggered them. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. As far as Trudeau, I mean, we'll see. We're going to publish this podcast, literally publish it 48 hours after we record. Something might have happened till then, but I think Trudeau's in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Canada is not doing well, right?
No.
That's one of so outside of, COVID and how it was handled, and that was a polarizing, at the end of the day, if you look back on that time, like Canada had very strict policies. They took some very heavy-handed measures against people like the truckers, freezing bank accounts, a lot of things that many Canadians were really in support of, but another chunk of Canadians were really opposed to. You combine that with, slowing growth rates, increased debt. A lot of what Freeland was talking about in her criticism is like, we need to get more fiscally responsible. And she didn't feel that the current administration had the either ability or desire to do that. And that was in her resignation, kind of behind that was a lack of confidence that they're going to move forward in the way that's best for Canada. And that way is with more fiscal responsibility, in her opinion.
And some quick statistics about Canada. Their GDP per capita right now in 2024 is almost identical to 2012. So their GDP per capita hasn't changed. I mean, it's gone up and down in between that area, but you have a amount of money coming in for an individual akin to 2012. Of course, it's per capita, so it's not exact. But my point is, the U.S. GDP per capita has been continuing to rise, and Canada's has more or less flatlined since Trudeau took office. So this finger pointing at Trudeau is kind of well put. And one of the main issues of why that's happened is because Canada's immigration has gone through the roof as a percentage of their population. So over the past several years since COVID, they've had 500,000 people per year coming in. That's official statistics. Like, they're coming in, with paper and legally. There's obviously a lot of illegal immigration there as well. And the problem that they have is the U.S. or the Canadian government has put so much bureaucracy in the private sector that a lot of these immigrants coming in are bringing down the GDP per capita because they're not contributing to the Canadian economy enough, because the Canadian government is holding back the private sector. In fact, the Canadian GDP right now is over 40% supported by government spending, jobs, and initiatives. So the private sector is just getting beat down, and you can't grow your GDP if the government's holding you back.
Isn't that similar to the US? I think the US is almost,
The US has had a spike in government spending as well. And I would say that's a big problem with the US. I'm just saying for Canada specifically, the immigration, why their GDP hasn't grown per capita as much, because they're having so many people coming in, but those people aren't necessarily contributing to the private sector GDP economy, which is able to usually exponentially grow compared to the government sector. And that's what's holding them back right now. And so you see the GDP growth this year, it's like flat. It's they're projecting it for 2024 to be under 1%. They're in trouble. And today, Canadian dollar to US dollar is at a 20-year low or high, however you look at it. The purchasing power of the Canadian dollar to the US dollar is a 20-year offset rate. And that's going to be horrible for Canadians looking at that. It's super frustrating.
Especially given, the number of them that travel, right?
Yeah.
So many of them travel, and they leave Canada and go to the US, they go to Mexico, they go all over, especially during the wintertime. And you're going to feel that when you've lost 20% of your purchasing power.
Since 2021. Yeah, 20% of purchasing power has been lost since 2021. That's just 3 years ago. I don't remember during COVID, I was in Mexico for a while, and we were in some town. I forget where we were. Just north of Puerto Vallarta. What's that? What town is that? Anyway, it was like all Canadians.
It's all Canadians. It's
unbelievable how many Canadians were.
They got to get out.
It was unreal. They were escaping. Yeah, it was
crazy. My take on it is, it's once again, it's an incumbent that's struggling, because if you look all around the world, incumbent governments are under pressure because things have not been going that well, and people are hungry for some change. Speaking of change, there's some change going on in Germany. Really interesting as well. As this was happening in Canada, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has lost a confidence vote in the Bundestag, German parliament. That triggered a series of events that's going to lead to early elections in Germany. It's going to be I think it's February 25th of next year. This is huge because it's only the fourth time in 75 years that Germany is going to hold snap elections. So what happened? He held a vote. He asked for a vote of confidence, and he lost it. And that triggered these elections to happen in February. Some of the main reasons that, looking into it, one, disagreements about fiscal policy. He's got kind of a consortium government where he didn't have a strong majority. They disagree about what to do fiscally. A lot of disagreements about Ukraine. A lot of the tide is kind of shifting in Ukraine. The country's now divided a little bit more in what they should do. And then economic challenges. Those are some of the main reasons stated for what's happening in Germany. What do you think, Cody? What's kind of the main factor here? And is this also the other thing people have been talking about, is that this was actually just a sly move by him because he knew he would lose, and then he'd have an opportunity to go into elections in February and pull together a tighter government that gave him more of a mandate for change. What are your thoughts on what's actually happening?
I'm glad you mentioned that last part, because Canadian, British, and German, the politics are different than the U.S. and how it's structured. And as a U.S. person, it's a little bit different or difficult to understand, because it's not like a president and Congress and the different branches of the government. You have this parliament that can, as you said, vote a no confidence vote for the chancellor or the prime minister.
Dissolve the government.
Correct.
Yes.
And from a U.S. perspective, like, what? The government's dissolved? What does that mean? It sounds like you have anarchy, but it's not like that, really. It's just, we're getting a new PM, or they're going to vote for somebody else, or there's another party that can come up. But I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a different game going on in those politics where they can do that, where they can force these early elections or these early votes from the parliament to reconsolidate their power for the upcoming election that they'll be having. So bigger picture, though, as you said earlier, governments around the world are having this swing, the pendulum swinging back the other way. The general population's unhappy. Growth is stagnating in a lot of countries.
Germany and Canada have a lot in common.
A lot. In fact, Germany's GDP is decreasing, projected to decrease this year. So Canada's slowing down on its flatline. Germany's going down. And by the way, Germany's still a big economy. I think they're number 4 or 5 in the world right now. So they're far outpacing the rest of Europe, but they're slowing down. So, and also it's got to be super frustrating if you're a German you're on the EU standard, or sorry, the Euro standard. In the EU, all the other countries are underperforming you, but you're the economy kind of lifting everybody up, which means you're responsible for a lot of the proportional spending within the EU as well as
Yeah.
NATO. But also, a lot of countries are looking at you like, hey, take the lead, Germany. And then you have this government that may be holding them back, meaning the German economy. And as a German, it's frustrating. So that's where I think these elections, coming up for countries like Germany, like UK, like Canada, are going to be that momentum going back the other way. Australia as well, same situation there. People are fed up. They want growth. They want a better lifestyle.
I was reading too that so Ukraine, and whether they should fund Ukraine and continue to fund this war, has the sentiment in Germany has really started to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really like 50-50 with a slight preference now for ending the war and, basically supporting Ukraine, giving up some territory and just making peace. And
Right.
if you look at some of the far right and far left governments, they're gaining some traction, and both of them are anti-war, both far left and far right. And so that's one of the ideas, is that because of the kind of pressure from some of the far right and far left governments, that's going to continue to push them towards maybe making peace. We'll see. I don't know. It's just it's very interesting when you're sitting here and you're just looking at all the changes that have happened so quickly, right? From a European perspective, looking at the U.S., a massive shift happened in the U.S. This was a month ago, and now you're seeing a massive shift happening potentially in Canada, massive shift happening in Germany, and things starting to move very, very fast. So, yeah, it's very interesting, and I think my belief is that the euro is not going to last much longer.
Yeah, I made a prediction last year at a speech down in Miami. I said I didn't think the euro would make it past the late 2030s.
Late 2030s.
Late 2030s. So I would I think 2035 on.
That is gone.
It's just countries are going to give up, like Germany. They're going to be like, screw this. What are we doing here? We're the leading economy in Europe, and we're playing this game.
They'll have a Brexit vote.
Yeah, they're going to. And same with actually Italy, Hungary, Austria. All of these countries have grassroots movements to have an exit out of the EU because they're sick of it. And every country has their own reason why. But the bottom line is you have multiple countries with different languages, different cultural values, different economic standards, meaning Germans are super, they're on it. They're super, timely. Their engineering and all those things. And then you combine it with another culture, like, not to pick on the Italians, but Italians are like, oh, whatever, we can be an hour late to dinner and blah, blah. Like, they've got some nice clothes and cars.
Just different
too,
values, different
values. Absolutely. And there's no specific finger pointing to one country, but you try and blend them together and then play in the same team. And there's going to be conflict. And that's why this whole Euro experiment is going to end. I don't know when, but I think late 2030s is looking at there.
One of my biggest things I look at too is, the limits that they've put on innovation and growth, specifically in the tech world in the EU, combined with the fact that a lot of the growth going forward is going to be in artificial intelligence, like in AI. And if you listen to Peter Thiel talk about the difference between AI companies and some of the previous winners in the internet age, AI companies are all going to be location dependent. He talks about how there's going to be a massive boom in Silicon Valley because a lot of these AI companies don't need that many people to run them, but all the people need to be effectively in the same location. And when you've got an European Union that is not making it easy to do business, is not making it easy to innovate, a lot of the gains that are going to come from the growth in these industries are not going to be captured at all in the EU. And that's, in my opinion, a lot of the pressure, I think, from some of the individuals, the population will, when they start getting frustrated and be like, well, we can't build here, we can't make things happen here. I can see that leading to change in the future. And you look at it, you compare to what's happening in the US, right? Just this week, SoftBank announced they're going to pledge $100 billion to create 100,000 jobs in AI and technology. So, and we're going to play this video because it's absolutely hilarious. Masayoshi Son, the head of SoftBank, I don't know the exact title, maybe head of investments, I'm not sure, meets with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and effectively he'd already planned to announce that he was going to pledge 100 billion to the US, invest in the US, and then Trump asked him live on TV if he'll double it. So we'll play the video right here.
I'm excited to go, and we were discussing, and President Trump said, "Masa, double that is not enough. Maybe go for more, right?"
That's what I'm going to ask him right now. Would you make it $200 billion instead of that? He can actually, believe it or not, he can actually afford to do that. Would you do that?
Well, my promise is 100, but he's now asking to do more. I think with your leadership, my partnership with you, with your support, I will try to make it happen.
This is one of my favorite videos. This is one of my favorite videos. It's
so
amazing. I don't like, if you watch the video, Trump's got this like power, he like literally grabs him like by the shoulder. So Trump's playing this like power game. I think he likes it over. Masayoshi likes it overall because it's like Trump, and he even says like, "I'm really excited about Trump," and he's like, "Yeah, this is my bro. I'm broing around," but at the same time, he's like, you can just see Trump's this big dude like grabbing onto him and just publicly says, double your investment to 200 billion.
Do you want to do it? You've got the money. You want to do it?
Yeah. And and that's, I think, one thing that is really off-putting for the general public with Trump, because most people are not familiar with being in a boardroom or being in a high-level business negotiation. And the reality is business is cutthroat and can be very blunt and off-putting. And that's where Trump really shines. And this video we just showed is a perfect example of how that actually goes down. And Trump is a freaking master at it. He's so damn good.
But he's also, people, it doesn't show the rapport that he's built with him.
Of course not.
That's the part where I think it's off-putting for people. It's like, clearly Masayoshi-san, he loves it. He was like laughing and like kind of joking. He said, "You're a good negotiator, ha ha ha." But they've clearly built some rapport.
Of course, but Trump waited till they were in public to say you want to double your investment. But he also is like, double your investment, so it's kind of put him on the spot. But then at the same time, he gives this backhanded compliment of like, "Oh, but you are worth that, or you do have that much money."
You're the only one who can. You're the one who
so
can.
It's kind of like, hey, you are rich enough, so it's pumping his ego at the same time. I just love that interaction because it's a perfect encapsulation of why Trump is good at what he does in that world.
Yeah, I think we should do more of it. Just bring in people who want to pledge money to the U.S., get them on live TV and ask them for more, man.
Totally. Real quick side story that's really interesting here. You recommended a book to me, Blood and Oil. We've talked about this book several times. It's about Mohammed bin Salman, who's the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. And there's an interesting part of the book about how Masayoshi is in Saudi Arabia raising $40 billion from the public investment fund of Saudi Arabia. And what happened is they took billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia, and then SoftBank ended up investing in Uber. What were the other companies? WeWork. That was a disaster. Yeah. WeWork. Anyways, he was lighting money on fire. They lost all this money. And go ahead.
But did they?
Yeah, that's a whole nother story there.
Yeah.
But I guess my point more is that he went into Saudi Arabia, got all this money out of them, put it into tech companies that didn't have direct returns back to Saudi Arabia. And what the Saudis were trying to do, they were trying to attract foreign investment into Saudi Arabia. But what happened was the money kept being pulled out of the Saudis. Anyways, long story short, what I'm saying is the irony of this whole thing is that I wonder if there's any money left over in SoftBank fund that is going from Saudi through SoftBank and back into the U.S. And this full circle thing of having money come back to the U.S. is this dollar milkshake theory, which is the strong dollar ends up sucking up all the value around the world, because at the end of the day, the U.S. is so innovative and they're the biggest economy, and money just flows back there naturally. And that's what's happening right now.
It's interesting. My point about whether or not he actually lost money is, I think, I haven't looked at all the returns. I know that some of the returns were so outsized that they offset the losses in like WeWork and that sort of a thing.
Yeah, well,
You know,
someone
it's like,
should reach out to us. Let us know what the SoftBank actual returns were, because I think you're right. There were some big unicorns they hit, but the WeWork story is wild with Adam Newman getting that huge, golden handcuff or golden paycheck, whatever you want to call it, send off, even though he ran that company in the ground.
WeWork is insane. I knew a lot about what was going on in WeWork because I had a friend who worked there from way back, like right, like at the beginning, and the stories that I was hearing 10 years ago when WeWork was like publicly the darling, were just insane. I knew back then it was like if there was a way to short WeWork, it would have been the best trade possible. This is before they went out. They did go public, but this is before that. I mean, crazy stories like building $100,000 bathrooms for Adam, paying consultants $80,000 to come in for one day to set up like cold plunges, stuff like that. Insane. There's just like a taste of what was going on. Everybody knows about it now, but it was interesting that it came out. I was like hearing about it 10 years ago. You hear the whispers, and then it comes out.
The Saudis' PIF money at work. Their private investment.
It was
just our public investment fund
buying
Adams.
bathrooms, buying cold plunges.
Yeah, contrast therapy, your sauna cold plunge. Man, what a wild journey that's been for SoftBank.
Speaking of eccentric tech billionaires, so very interesting story came out about what is going on in the Galapagos of Africa and kind of a new approach to conservation that's being piloted there. Why don't you dive in and share a little bit about what's actually going on in, I want to say it's Principe. Is that right?
Yeah, Sao Tome and Principe. I mean, it's originally Portuguese, so I don't speak Portuguese, so I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but it's these little islands off the west coast of Africa, and they're known as like the Galapagos of Africa in terms of biodiversity and animals and just pure beauty.
It's like Galapagos, but instead of desert, rainforest.
Exactly. But it's got a tiny population. There's really no economy there, and this tech billionaire bought up all this land there that were old hotels, old resorts. But I mean, when I say resorts, this is like really bare bones. And over the past decade, he's spent a lot of money kind of gentrifying them. And so a couple things going on here. First of all, I wanted to bring this story up because it sounds like a cool place to visit. I really want to go there. It's supposedly
Scuba
beautiful.
diving.
Yeah. I think there's some surf there too. And it's like barely traveled to at all. So this guy, this tech billionaire,
Mark Shuttleworth.
Yep. He gentrified all these resorts and he owns several different properties. And we'll throw up the website too. It's hbdprincipe.com. You can go check it out. It looks super cool. But what he did is he created this natural dividend program, and he's issuing a quarterly sum of the profits of his ecotourism operation back into the economy of these islands. And prior to what's going on there's literally a couple thousand people there that have no economy at all. It's one of the poorest places in the world. And it's this model for how ecotourism can lift up a local economy. And there's been like variations of this around the world, but I think this is the purest one in the sense that there's an actual dividend coming from the company back into the economy of these two islands, or these couple islands there. And we're going to see if it works or not, but it looks like a cool place to travel to. And I think it's definitely on my list now.
It's interesting too, because he talks about some of the limitations with the traditional ways to protect land like this. Traditionally you'd buy it and then make it illegal to cut it down, right? You'd buy it up and then make it illegal to create negative, let's just say negative consequences on the land. He's like, but it doesn't really work in this scenario because it's a small island. He was like, if I was to buy it all up, like where would people live? And like, where would they, it just creates a weird dynamic. And this dynamic, he was actually taking drones and flying over and taking video of the trees and the land. And so he can track it to see if people go and chop it down. And the part that I find interesting is he wants to create it in a way so that people have the option to go down and chop down a tree, but that's just going to reduce the dividend that they'll get. So there's kind of a collective control over it, and they can make their own. There's like autonomy. They can make their own choices. If they want to cut something down, there's an example he talks about cutting down like a forest and creating a palm oil plantation. That they can do that, but that's going to reduce the dividend that they get. So the trade-off is always there in people's minds. Very, very interesting, and maybe a path that could be used in other places to preserve some of the land, because I think in Africa too is they're doing something interesting, preserving natural game areas and animals.
Then they're doing it in Uganda with the gorillas or something. Like if they preserve the gorilla habitat, these people get a certain dividend for that. I think I'd read something about that.
I think so. Yeah.
But I think the bigger picture here too is this. I don't want to use conscious capitalism. I would say like it's more sustainable capitalism. I don't know. It's just this bigger picture idea that, hey, you can't come into a foreign land as an investor, pop up a Marriott / like Sandals resort and just bring people in, pump money, and expect that the broader economy of your location is going to thrive. We've just seen that over and over and over again. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Or it just like, show me your incentives and I'll show you the outcomes, right? If the incentive is to take care of the land because you get paid better,
right,
then that's going to be the outcome. If your incentive is to sell the land for the highest possible amount of money to a Sandals, to a Hilton, whatever, that's the outcome. And yeah, it's definitely solving a need here. I'm interested in where it goes. And
well, I brought this up too because
I'd love to go check it out,
because we've been in Guyana, and people have listened to our episodes before. We're looking at ecotourism in Guyana, and the
exact same thing is happening. Like,
yes, yeah, it's exact same thing. But we've looked at Guyana, and it's the ecotourism industry there is basically non-existent. It has not been developed. But there's so many challenges we've looked at, which ranges from preserving nature to integrating with the local communities to making the government happy to actually making it worthwhile for investors to even invest. Yeah. And we haven't really found like a model that works, but you look at this and go, this is another way to go at it. And
this is also effectively the same thing that the president of Guyana is pitching to the world, saying, hey, we are going to capture carbon, pay us to maintain our rainforest and capture the carbon that you emit in other places. And help us create a revenue source that does not encourage us to chop down this beautiful rainforest and develop it, and allows us to continue to thrive and grow and modernize as an economy without the traditional trade-off of needing to chop down rainforest, slash and burn, and create, farming or whatever, a higher yield on these rainforests. So it's interesting. I'm excited. I think it's great to rethink this. What, Cody, what are you doing for the Christmas holiday?
All right. My kids get out of school this week early. So parents around the world will know, on one hand, it's awesome. You get to spend time with your kids, but on the other hand, it's like,
so is it done this week? Like when is it? When are they done?
It's like they're done on a Thursday, and then they're out for almost
Friday's off.
Yeah, but then they're out for almost 3 weeks because they actually resume, like, I forget what it is, like the second week of January or like halfway through the first week of January. Yeah. And so I'm here in Florida, which is great because I think a lot of people in the snow, your kids are all cooped up in the house and everyone has like cabin fever and you're like fighting with each other. We're going to be outside on the beach, running around, and it'll be good to be with the kids. And I'm actually going to California too. So I'm going to do a cross country trip with the kids, and that's always fun. See family and do a little exploring of America.
Nice.
What about you? What are you doing?
Similar. We've got, so this week, next week's off. We're going to go drive north to go see my parents up in the Seattle area. So we'll be up there, which is exciting. Be there for a week. We're going to go crabbing. So that's a fun tradition growing up on Bainbridge Island, that every once in a while, not every year, they open up crabbing during Christmas time. So you get my dad's boat. We go out. It's usually slopping, raining, cold. You go drop the crab pots. and then you pull them up on Christmas Day, and then if you got
do you guys have
well,
crab for Christmas? You have scallops oysters. You have oysters for Thanksgiving and crab for Christmas.
For Thanksgiving sometimes. Yeah. Or
wow.
Crab for Thanksgiving, crab for Christmas. Often crab for Christmas if they open it up. So that's fun. We all have the same normal stuff too, like we'll have like a turkey or ham or lamb or whatever. But yeah, that's a fun thing. And then we'll just spend some time outside doing a little, actually, what I've been pretty inspired about, and I think you'll fully buy into this. So a guy who I want to have on the podcast, his name is Alistair Humphreys, and he's written a bunch of books about adventure, but he wrote one book called Micro Adventures, and you may have heard of this guy. And he talks about how he wants the best thing that you can do, or like his favorite thing he's put into practice over the last couple of years, are committing to once a month micro adventures with his kids. So what that means, and he talks about examples, like one of them is just sleeping outside, like pitching the tent in the backyard in December when it's cold and going in the backyard and sleeping in a tent. Example of a micro adventure, or going kayaking for a day, or driving out somewhere and having fun. And so I got excited about this when I read it. I was like, I'm going to do this. So I booked a tiny little yurt up in the woods, and I'm going to take my son, and we're going to go spend the night up in this tiny little yurt on a lake up in the Olympic Peninsula. And that's going to be super fun. So
I love
we're just
that.
going to, yeah,
that's
it's
awesome.
Great. I want to have this guy on the show because he's
what's
very
it called?
interesting.
Micro adventures.
He's done like crazy big adventures. I think he's ridden his motorcycle. I want to say like, he's like a type of guy who's ridden his motorcycle across Africa, like adventures, like that type of stuff. He's done a bunch of really, really big ones. And then this book is talking about, as you get older and you have less time, like what can you do in between the big adventures?
I mean, I just came back from Sedona, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. And I feel like there's some exposure to nature that humans need. It's in our DNA. It's how we evolved. And I feel like there's some correlation to the mental health epidemic, especially in the US, but worldwide. It's like, you just need to get outside and just like get exposed to dirt, water, coldness, everything. You need that. And our culture has definitely lost that. And there's got to be some correlation to like 100 years ago, maybe 200 years ago in the American West, like I don't think people were suffering from depression. Of course, they were surviving day to day, like hand to mouth, but there wasn't like this existential threat they were worrying about, like, I don't know, far away financial problems. And I think there's some sort of mental health component to that for us today that we need. We need to be having these exposures to nature on a weekly basis, at least.
There's no question. And one of my favorite YouTube channels is this guy who, have you seen this guy up in Alaska who has I think he's got like 3 kids, and he films himself and his kids doing these like crazy Alaska camping, hunting adventures. I watched one where he kayaks out through the ice and the glaciers, then he fishes and he cooks up all his food. My favorite one, he's got his kid behind a dog sled. So he's got literal dogs. They're on the snow, and his kid is like packed between reindeer pelts, laying down. He's like a 4-year-old. And he's talking about what they're going to do. He's like, well, we're going out on an adventure today. And I'll find the clip. I'll put it in. We're going out on an adventure today. He's like, we got our stuff to sleep. It's in the middle of winter. He's got our stuff to sleep. It's going to be -20 today. But we've got all of our gear. He's like, there may be wolves, there may be bears, but we're prepared for that. And then his son's just got this huge grin. He's like ready for the biggest adventure of his entire life.
That's awesome.
And they go out and they camp in the middle of nowhere. It's super inspiring stuff.
We're in the Alaskan bush in the dead of winter, and we're doing another extreme survival camping video. We're going to see if we can't survive out here in the winter with no tent, no heaters, no sleeping bags. You ready, Nathan? Yeah, you are.
Well, I'm not going to be in Alaska, but I got my son got a fishing pole for his 5th birthday last week. So over winter break, we're going to be slaying it in the lake next to us.
Good. I love it.
The Florida lake.
Well, thank you guys for joining this podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, my parting message is to take some time this holiday season to get out there, have some fun adventures, some micro adventures or some bigger adventures, whatever suits you. And we'll see you on the next episode.